Rules Committee will come to order, and I want to thank everyone for being here this afternoon. I think everyone was aware of what happened in Fort Hood, Texas last night, as once again members of the United States military and their families, as well as all Americans, were shocked by the tragic loss of lives. And I would ask that we take a moment of silence at the Rules Committee in honor of those people. Thank you very much. We remember the families and those who sacrificed, and we pray for the recovery of each of those people and their families as we move forward. Today, the committee will meet to consider three important pieces of legislation that will increase transparency and accountability in our federal budgeting process. H.R. 1871, the Baseline Reform Act. H.R. 1872, the Budget and Accounting Transparency Act, and H.R. 1874, the Pro-Growth Budgeting Act, each make important changes to how our nation manages its budget. And as a result of these bills, Congress and the American public will receive a more accurate picture of our budget through improved accounting mechanisms, increased transparency, and I believe enhanced cost estimates. And today we're joined by the chairman of the Budget Committee, a man who has for a long, long time dedicated himself not only to each of these precepts, but also a direct dialogue and discussion with the American people about where we are, where we're headed, and how we might get there. And I'm delighted that we're joined today by the Budget Chairman, Paul Ryan. Before we go any further, however, Chairman Ryan, I'd like to defer to the gentlewoman, the ranking member, for any opening statement she'd like to make. The gentlewoman is recognized.
I thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I welcome certainly Mr. Ryan. It's always a pleasure to have him here. But in relationship to Fort Hood, I wish we would also pray, since all the perpetrators of Newtown, Aurora, Virginia Tech, Fort Hood, all had mental problems. Let's pray that we can get background checks in the United States. We could save a lot of lives that way. So we thank you very much for being here, Mr. Ryan. We'll probably save questions for you till Monday when we get the budget, because
I look forward to it.
All right. And when Mr. Van Hollen, I think, will be here on Monday. Thank you.
I thank the ranking member for her comments. In fact, I think all members of Congress are going to look at this new episode and find out what things we could have learned and changes that we might make. And I will be as forthright as you are and say that we do need to deal with issues that come as a result of this, and I hope that we'll be honest about that.
We simply can't turn our back on it.
Yeah. There are a number of things which I'm sure need to be addressed, and I look forward to this Congress and the American people with that dialogue. And we'll tell you that as a Texan, as well as Dr. Burgess, it hits really close to home, as we have seen others in New York and Connecticut and other places around the Colorado in this country. Virginia. And many others. Man, I thank you for your comments. Gentleman yields back time. Mr. Ryan, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Without objection, anything you have in writing will be entered into the record. And I just want you to know that we suggested trying to get you something to drink, and Mrs. Slaughter said, well, you get water from me. Mrs. Slaughter said if she'd been here, you'd gotten a milkshake.
Actually, I prefer water, so thanks for the thought.
There you go.
Appreciate it.
There you go.
So, this is great.
I watch what he drinks in the mornings, and it's pretty slim pickings. Pretty slim pickings. Mr. Ryan, we're delighted that you're with us today, and I think all members of this body recognize that the work that you've done on our behalf has made us all more aware of the world we live in and how we're going to pay for it. And with that said, the gentleman's recognized.
Thank you. I am here on behalf of three members of the Budget Committee, Dr. Price, Mr. Woodall, and Mr. Garrett, to present three budget reform bills. Let me give you just a sense of the big picture. I'll ask unanimous consent that my statement be included in the record. The 1974 Budget Act is the last time the budget process was really basically overhauled. And there's a bias in this law in many perverse ways. It's a bias toward more spending. It's built into the very tools we use to write our laws. One of the reasons that we spend too much money in many ways is we don't keep track of it very well. We don't even have a very good accounting of it. And so we think that the budget process is in dire need of an overhaul. Rather than taking one large bill, completely rewriting the entire budget process, which was an effort for many years, many members of Congress from both sides of the aisle, Mr. Cooper, Mr. Cox tried, we decided to break it into incremental pieces and reforms. These are three of them. First, which is what we want to see tomorrow, is the Pro-Growth Budgeting Act by Congressman Price. This is a bill that should have bipartisan support. I think it will. It's basically, we want members to understand the economic effects of legislation that's coming before them. And so it simply asks the Congressional Budget Office on major pieces of legislation that has a fiscal impact of more than 0.25% of the GDP, it's about $43 billion in today's terms, that they measure the economic effects. Its effect on labor markets, its effect on incomes, on capital markets, on jobs, and things like this. We don't want to impale CBO with too much on small bills. That's why we have this minimum threshold, that it's got to be substantial legislation so that we have a jobs effect of it. This is something that people on both sides of the aisle have said they could use, so that when we bring big pieces of legislation, what we do now is we assume it has no effect on the economy. That's just not true. I mean, fiscal policy has an effect on the economy. And so we ought to have a sense from the Congressional Budget Office what those economic effects are going to be if we're doing major fiscal policy. That's, in a nutshell, I can go into any detail you'd like to, what the Woodall Pro-Growth Budgeting Act does. That's the Price Pro-Growth Budgeting Act. The Baseline Budget Reform Act is introduced by Congressman Woodall, fixes a quirk in our budget process. Under current law, the baseline assumes that every single discretionary account gets an increase every year to keep up with inflation. That means, regardless of the facts on the ground, regardless of whether our program is working or not, or whether our program is even necessary, we have automatic spending increases in these programs to begin with, before we even start about debating how much more to increase or decrease a bill. We just simply want to wipe the slate clean, just like families do, which is $1 today is $1 tomorrow, and then we discuss whether or not it should be moved up or down. So we want to have a baseline that reflects not an automatic spending increase, but an actual zero-based budget. That's something that we think is very important, because Congress should set priorities. We shouldn't have a bias in the system before Congress has a time to decide how a program should be leveled, how it should be spent, whether it should go up or down. Congress should make that decision. It shouldn't be automatic in the baseline. The third one is the Budget and Accounting Transparency Act by Congressman Garrett. Washington makes a lot of loan guarantees. Every time the federal government has a credit-related program, like a loan guarantee, it is putting taxpayers at risk. And therefore, if a loan goes bad, if a default occurs, that triggers a taxpayer bailout. Unfortunately, though, we don't measure this. So we're not measuring the true cost of what taxpayer dollars are at risk when we guarantee loans. So what we're saying here is we've got to make sure that we use accounting standards called fair value accounting, which is what the private sector uses, in measuring the cost of credit programs. Right now, we believe that we are underestimating the cost of federal credit programs by roughly $55 billion a year. This bill does one other thing. It's something that CBO agrees with and has done for a number of years, but OMB hasn't, and that is Fannie and Freddie, which are wards of the state. Those are now under federal control. They should be put on budget. This does cost the government money. There is a fiscal effect of having these two giants on our books. We should reflect that in our accounting. Is basically what it does. These, we think, are three common sense things. Let's have the Congressional Budget Office give us an economic impact analysis on major pieces of legislation. Let's take out the upward spending bias in our baseline on discretionary spending so that we in Congress can make the decision on whether a program should be increased or not. And let's have a better measurement of the true cost and the true taxpayer risk of the various credit programs that our federal government engages in. And that's basically what the three bills are, and I await your questions.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I think I have two questions, and the first one is that we routinely hear, oh my gosh, what you're trying to do is to make sure everything slows down because Congressional Budget Office has to do all this extra work, and my gosh, we can't possibly get things done if that's right. I think what you've done in this bill by Dr. Price, and by the way, if he were at the podium, and he is sitting in the audience today and listening to the great words that we're saying about him, but I would hope that the response that you would have would be one of a man that's been involved in requests from CBO for a long, long time and could rationally balance what's a reasonable request and what isn't. So could you put it in that context?
Yeah, I've worked very closely with CBO for 8 years. I've had a hand in helping select the directors. I work with them on their budget. I'm very familiar with how this agency works. So we worked with CBO on doing this. The thing is, CBO does do this analysis. They already have the power to do this kind of analysis. For instance, the budget we'll be debating next week that I'm sure Elsie and Ms. Slaughter will be enthusiastically in favor of, because of the CBO analysis we have, which shows that it produces better economic growth, that it produces more economic output, and actually gives us a fiscal dividend, which gives us even better deficit reduction. That's an analysis that CBO did based upon what our budget achieves. So CBO has the computing power. The question is, every time the member of Congress submits any kind of a fiscal request, an estimation request, are we bogging them down with producing this kind of an analysis, which will bring the place to a screeching halt?
Right.
That's a legitimate concern. That is why we put a threshold in this bill that says the fiscal size, whether it's spending or taxing, has to be bigger than 0.25% of gross domestic product. Today, that's about $43 billion. So we basically had to have a minimum, that you had to get over in order to trigger this kind of an analysis. Because, take appropriations, for example, there are thousands of requests from the appropriators that are sent to CBO on just small things that they're not necessarily looking for this kind of an impact. That would bog them down too much. So we believe in working with CBO that we've found sort of the proper balance so that it doesn't gum up the works, that we can get the analysis quickly, and that we can be better informed policymakers so that we actually understand the economic effects of the things we're contemplating here.
So we're actually going into the Budget Act of 1974 and adding a piece part to that that you believe is a high enough threshold to where you could gain the benefit and understanding it would not be a detriment to the CBO.
That's right.
You've looked at
That's right.
them.
And we've worked with CBO on this, yeah.
For a long time, and you believe it's not a new process necessarily, but one which
we just want to codify this analysis. So I, as the chairman of the Budget Committee, get to do this analysis. I think other members ought to be able to get the same. Right now, I can have them do this for the budgets I produce, but I think every member of the House ought to be able to get this kind of an analysis done for them if they have significant bills that have big significant fiscal impacts.
Good. I have a second question, and that relates to, I believe, Mr. Woodall's bill. And it's the baseline budgeting bill. And I had an opportunity when we had a guy's name was Jim Nussel, who you may remember him. But Jim served as chairman of the Budget Committee, and I sat on the Budget Committee at that time, and entirely different types of questions and realities were going on at that time. But the question I've got is now after sequestration, where I believe that there are cuts to the discretionary spending side, how does that work with this baseline budgeting law or the law in 1974 in this provision?
So the way the baseline measures a program from one year to the next, it automatically puts an inflationary update in those numbers so that it assumes that the dollar next year is equal to the dollar last year with inflation. The two champions of this idea are Rob Woodall and Louis Gohmert. So this is the Woodall-Gohmert zero baseline budgeting reform, which if there's a program, first of all, this is all discretionary spending. So this doesn't deal with mandatory spending. For instance, there are a lot of laws that are in mandatory program that require CPI adjustments, like a COLA for Social Security or something like that. This doesn't affect that. So Congress in those areas said, we believe there should be a cost of living adjustment on these programs. In this case, on discretionary spending, Congress never made that decision. Congress doesn't say there ought to be a COLA on, this agency at the Department of Commerce or this agency over at the Pentagon. We should spend, $8 billion on the A-10 Warthog program, and that's it. We should decide whether it should be 8 plus something or not. Mm-hmm. That's the whole point, is it takes that automatic inflationary buildup out of the number that that becomes the baseline on which we then make our decisions, so that the baseline is flat and steady, and then Congress gets to decide whether or not something should be plussed up or not.
Yes, sir. Now, I think I did understand that, maybe even when I was on the committee. But now in the world of sequestration.
Want to give you a sense of it? It's about 1.7 trillion. Over the last 10 years, this automatic increase was about $1.7 trillion. So with sequester, right now we're at 1014. That's what the budget we're about to mark up will do. That is budgetary caps. But when we set the caps, we measure at that area. But the baseline itself has this inflation update in them. So caps are separate than the baseline.
Well, we just simply ignore it. It was in a budget projection, but we didn't actually go and say, okay, we'll take that one and ignore where we're. It's just, it's getting your eraser out every year.
That's right. So in the baseline, we are measuring these programs with an inflationary adjustment automatically.
Right.
That is different than sequester, different than a cap, which just says, here's the actual dollar amount, and it's set at this area. The sequester is just a formula that in the discretionary, there's a mandatory sequester and discretionary sequester. That formula just says, here's the nominal number, it is up or down by this amount. So 1014 now, and then it goes on this path. So it is different than the accounting of measuring a program going forward in the baseline versus the actual artificial legal cap, which is what the caps do, and the sequester is just a formula that lowers those caps.
So in essence, it was a automatic management plan to look ahead. If we did this, what would it look like? Not that we did it because it was there.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Super. Thank you very much. Dr. Fox?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the Chairman of the Budget Committee for being here and presenting these good bills. I have no questions to ask him, but I'm very grateful for his good work.
Thank you.
Gentlewoman yields back her time. Mrs. Slaughter.
Well, as we said before, I think on our side, we're just going to listen today, and we'll ask questions Monday for the budget.
Then I may assume until somebody tells me differently that I will not come back and forth. And so thank you very much. I'm trying to gain concurrence on that, and that is true. Thank you very much. A gentleman from Florida is recognized. You have no question. Gentleman's recognized.
Just one thing. I just had to make a comment on Woodall's bill. I wish when I was sheriff we got an automatic increase in our budget. That would have been phenomenal. But every time we had increases, whether it was fuel or insurance or whatever, we had to go back to the appropriators and say, this is the reason why we need more money. And I just think that's how the real world works.
Yeah, and in discretionary spending, it's assumed in every part of the budget, all of it.
And it's not equal.
Yeah.
It isn't. So I think it's a great, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gentleman yields back time. The gentleman from Orlando, Florida is recognized. The gentleman has no questions. Dr. Burgess.
Let me just ask a question for clarification. When we do something legislatively, we get the Congressional Budget Office to help us understand what the cost is going to be over time. When the agency puts out the regulations that were called for in that legislation, does the Congressional Budget Office come back and make another calculation about the regulation?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, but not on the, he's actually about the regulatory effects. So, so they revise their baseline every year based upon current law. So, for instance, a law passes, and they give you an estimate of what that law is going to do based on what they know then. Then that law is put into law, and the regulations come out, and then they look at that law with these new regulations, implementing it, and then they make their estimate based on what they then think the situation is, and they put that into the baseline.
And when is that readjustment done?
It's whenever it occurs. Every year, CBO redoes their baseline based upon what they now know to be the current law or the status quo. So I'm trying to think of an example.
Well, let me ask you about an example.
Okay.
The Mental Health Parity Act passed, and it was part of the Troubled Asset Relief Program. That was actually the vehicle for TARP to pass. The Affordable Care Act passed. The Affordable Care Act passed, and then they had the essential benefits package that included mental health benefits. But prior to that, under the mental health parity, benefits would only be required, if a company offered mental health benefits, they had to be equal to the other benefits that they offered, but they were not required to offer them.
Right.
Now, under the Affordable Care Act, they're required to offer them. The regulations about the Mental Health Parity Act were actually not done until November, December of 2013. So that must have had a profound effect upon the projected cost for mental health benefits, because now every insurance company in the country is required to offer mental health benefits, and according to the Mental Health Parity Act, they must be equal to all of the other medical benefits.
Now we have a standard benefits package under the Affordable Care Act. Yeah. So what
do we have any idea how big that is?
So I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if CBO has that yet. So what CBO will do, just like they do with the Affordable Care Act, is they looked at the draft of the legislation, and they gave us their estimate then. And then every year, based upon whatever information they have, whether a regulation's been implemented, whether it's been delayed, whether a law has changed or a new provision of law is triggered and come into place, then they look at the world as they know it that year, and they produce their estimate based on that information, based on current law information. So, for instance, we think on the Affordable Care Act, the risk profile of the pool is going to be different next year, looking back this past year, than what we thought it was going to be, right? We sort of know that. The young healthies didn't go into the pool quite like everybody expected. So that means it's much more, it's more expensive insurance, which means the subsidies cost more. CBO will have to reanalyze that based upon this new information that they get. Every year they do that, they look at the new information they have, and then they do a reanalysis of that. So that's how their baseline changes.
And then that information is brought to your budget committee, and that affects the budget that you produce for the committee?
It's brought to whoever wants a revenue, an estimate. So if we have a bill that just says, let's get rid of the Affordable Care Act, budget does that, then we get an estimate of what it will cost. So they produce cost estimates for anybody in Congress and any committee in Congress that based upon their most recent baseline. The Farm Bill is a good example. The Farm Bill was written on the prior baseline, and it was written on a baseline when it had commodity prices at such a certain level, and it passed. And then not long after, when CBO rewrote their baseline, they had to adjust commodity prices to reflect what they actually are now, and that changes the cost estimates of the farm programs. So that's just how it works, and that's how it should work, which is continually updating your estimates based upon the world as you know it today. And that's what CBO attempts to do.
Well, anything you can do to increase the transparency and the understandability of the budget process.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in peer review. The CBO on healthcare has got a long ways to go, but they've come a long ways. They've got some new modeling. They're bringing on new modelers over there to be able to better measure healthcare. This is a tricky area. They have a board of outside advisors that are bipartisan, nonpartisan, to try and give them a better sort of peer review on getting better revenue and better spending estimates on say, healthcare. So this is an area where we're pushing them to go farther in because we think that we need some better analysis. We've got new analysis on Medicare because they have a model that they can run on it, and we've been very impressed with the kind of research that they've been able to do. Because before we had to rely on the actuary over at CMS to get research because that's the only thing we had. And Congress should get its own research, which is the whole spirit of the 74 Budget Act, which we agree with, which is Congress should use its own books and its own revenue estimators and own spending estimators instead of relying on the administration because we're a separate branch of government. And in healthcare, we're pushing CBO, and they are going into more detail and having better computation power.
Thank you. I appreciate the answer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Ryan, do you mind giving us a brief overview of what you anticipate this committee becoming involved in looking at these budgets and looking at them on a moving forward basis in the next few months?
I would anticipate a CBC budget, a Democrat budget, progressive budget, study committee budget, maybe one more group. What's that? The President's budget and the HLC, the Liberty, are they doing one? Okay, so I think basically what we've always had. I don't think you'll see a surprise. I think you'll see, and I would encourage that these all be made in order, these budgets, these full substitutes. So I guess as you'll see those budgets be introduced next week. We marked up ours last night, so we're out of committee now. It's coming to you. And my anticipation would be those other groups that we've always had those budgets will be coming to you.
When do you anticipate, and there's probably been an announcement, and I failed to know it.
You asked the leader, but I think Wednesday,
The
Thursday.
president's budget.
I think the most substitutes we're thinking are Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday. We're thinking the substitutes are on Wednesday.
Good. I want to thank you for taking time to talk about these important and exciting ideas. I will tell you that the American people are paying attention and are watching and do expect us to be better stewards of their money, and I think it's done through proper budgeting.
That's the whole idea.
And it is the right thing to do. I want to thank you for being here today and representing not only these three gentlemen, but also the committee and this Congress well.
Great.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Appreciate it.
Gentlemen's now excused. This ends the hearing portion of H.R. 1871, H.R. 72, and H.R. 1874, and Chairman will be in receipt of a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant H.R. 1874, the Pro-Growth Budgeting Act of 2013, a structured rule. The rule provides 1 hour general debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Budget. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendments recommended by the Committee on the Budget, now printed in the bill, the amendment printed in Part A of the Rules Committee report, shall be considered as adopted, and the bill as amended shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill as amended. The rule makes in order only those further amendments printed in Part B of the Rules Committee report. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to demand for division of the question. The rule waives all points of order against the amendments printed in Part B of the report. The rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 2 of the rule provides that for consideration of H.R. 1871, the Baseline Reform Act of 2013, under a closed rule, the rule provides 1 hour debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Budget. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendment recommended by the Committee on the Budget, now printed in the bill, shall be considered as adopted, and the bill as amended shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill as amended. The rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 3 of the rule provides for the consideration of H.R. 1872, the Budget and Accounting Transparency Act of 2014, under a closed rule. The rule provides 1 hour debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Budget. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on the Budget, now printed in the bill, shall be considered as adopted, and the bill as amended shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions of the bill as amended. The rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
You've now heard the motion by the gentlewoman, Dr. Fox, and I would defer to the gentleman from Georgia for an explanation of the rule.
Mr. Chairman, I very much appreciate that. This is the kind of rule I get excited about seeing come out of this committee, where every single germane amendment was made in order, and where you had folks working on both sides of the aisle to take amendments that would not have been otherwise in order and get those ready for prime time. It's that cooperative spirit makes me feel good about what we do up here. Structured rule for H.R. 1874, the only bill for which there were those germane amendments offered. Closed rules on 1871 and 1872, not for lack of trying, but just for lack of amendments being offered. Again, is the definition of what I think this committee ought to be doing. I urge support for the rule.
Now heard the discussion from the gentleman. The committee is now available for discussion or amendment to this.
I wish the gentleman would get excited more often.
I'm very excited, and he is also. And, but however, it's kind of hard to get more fired up than the gentlewoman who is from New York, but who also had a history in Kentucky, knowing her team will be in the Final Four. Gentlewoman's recognized.
And don't anybody bet against them. Okay. I see we have one structure and two closed rules, so I have an amendment to the rule to move the committee grant H.R. 1871 and H.R. 1872 and H.R. 1874 open rules so that all members have the opportunity to offer amendments to the bills on the floor. Because this is a very important issue that affects us all, and we would like to see if we could open it all for people to have their say.
You've now heard the amendment from the gentleman from New York. Further discussion? Seeing none, those in favor of slaughter amendment, signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no.
Roll call, please.
Noes have it. A roll call.
Ms. Fox?
No.
Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Bishop? Mr. Bishop, no. Mr. Cole? Mr. Woodall? Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Nugent? Mr. Nugent, no. Mr. Webster? Mr. Webster, no. Ms. Ross Leighton? Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, no. Ms. Slaughter?
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings? Aye. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis? Aye. Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report total.
4 yeas, 7 nays.
The amendment's not agreed to. Not agreed to. Further discussion on amendment? Seeing none, the vote will now be on the motion from the gentlewoman, Dr. Fox from North Carolina. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
The ayes have it. The ayes have it.
And we'd like a roll call.
Gentlewoman asks for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Fox, aye. Mr. Bishop? Mr. Bishop, aye. Mr. Cole? Mr. Woodall? Aye. Mr. Woodall, aye. Mr. Nugent? Aye. Mr. Nugent, aye. Mr. Webster? Mr. Webster, aye. Ms. Ross Leighton? Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, aye. Ms. Slaughter?
No.
Ms. Slaughter, no. Mr. McGovern?
No.
Mr. McGovern, no. Mr. Hastings? Mr. Hastings, no. Mr. Polis? Mr. Polis, no. Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye.
Clerk will report the total.
7 yeas, 4 nays.
The motion is agreed to. Motion is agreed to. And the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Woodall, will be handling this for the Republicans.
And Mr. Hastings for the...
And Judge Hastings will be handling for the Democrats. I'd like to announce to the committee, just so that they are aware, that next Monday at 5 p.m. we will be meeting again for the purpose of the budget discussion. That way, and I know it's very difficult, we're entering the rainy season across the country, at least in the middle of the country, where it becomes difficult for people to get back, but we will start at 5 o'clock as planned right now, and this finishes business for the committee for the week.